My mother-in-law showed up at my brand-new home with 6 grandkids. No warning, no bags, no food. Just dropped them off and said, "Take care of us." Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. My name is Kira, and I'm in my 30s. After years of saving, I finally bought my first home. It was supposed to be the start of something beautiful for me and my husband Miles. I imagined quiet mornings, dinners together, maybe even starting our own family. But that dream shattered the day Jolene, my mother-in-law, showed up at the front door with her 6 grandchildren trailing behind her like a storm I never saw coming. She didn't ask. She didn't even smile politely. She just shoved the kids inside, their shoes dragging dirt across my new floors, and announced she would be staying indefinitely. She carried no food, no clothes, not even an overnight bag. When I stood there stunned, she simply looked at me and said, "Family takes care of family. That means you'll handle this." At first, I thought maybe she was joking. But when I glanced at Miles, he didn't laugh, he didn't protest. He just shrugged, almost like he expected me to accept it without question. My heart sank right there. This was our home, my safe place, and suddenly it felt like I was being invaded. The children scattered through the house, slamming doors, pulling down cushions, fighting over the TV remote. I tried to remain calm. I asked Jolene gently if this was just for a night or two. She cut me off with a sharp look, almost daring me to challenge her. "Don't be dramatic," she said, brushing past me as if I were a guest in my own home. I turned to Miles again, hoping he would step in, defend me, remind his mother that boundaries matter. Instead, he muttered, "It's just temporary, Kira. Don't make a scene." Those words sliced through me deeper than anything Jolene had said. He wasn't just ignoring me, he was siding with her. That night, as I tried to sleep with the sound of children screaming down the hall, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how my dream had turned so quickly into a nightmare. I had begged for boundaries, asked for respect, but no one listened. My voice felt smaller and smaller in my own house. Jolene strutted around like she owned the place, and Miles acted like nothing was wrong. I realized in that moment that this wasn't just about kids running wild or a pushy mother-in-law. This was about betrayal. The man I trusted to protect me was letting his mother steamroll me in my own home. That was the night I started keeping track of every word, every look, every moment. I didn't know it yet, but the seeds of something much bigger were already planted. And while they laughed and dismissed me, I promised myself I wouldn't be silenced forever. The next morning started with chaos. Toys scattered across the living room, juice spilled on the rug, and the sound of kids yelling from one end of the house to the other. Kira tried to stay calm, but inside she was exhausted. She hadn't slept at all, and the new house already looked worn down after only a day of Jolene and the children being there. She pulled Jolene aside in the kitchen and said in a low voice, "I can't handle this. I'm not ready for this many kids in the house. I need help." Jolene didn't soften or show understanding. She smirked and crossed her arms, replying, "Family takes care of family. You wanted a house, now you have one. Don't complain." The words stung. Kira wasn't refusing to help. She simply wanted respect and some sort of plan. But Jolene brushed her off like she was making excuses. Kira turned to Miles later that day, hoping he'd listen. She explained how overwhelmed she was, how she couldn't even enjoy her own home. Instead of showing concern, he sighed and told her, "You're overreacting. They're just kids. Stop being so dramatic." The dismissal cut deeper than anything his mother had said. She expected Jolene to be difficult, but Miles was supposed to be her partner, someone who stood beside her, not against her. The children ran through the halls, bumping into furniture, knocking over picture frames, spilling snacks on the floor. Kira tried to keep up, cleaning one mess after another, but every time she turned around, another disaster had already started. At one point, a vase that had belonged to her grandmother was shattered on the floor. She froze, her chest tight, waiting for someone to acknowledge what had happened. Jolene barely glanced at it before saying, "It was only a vase." Miles didn't say a word. Every corner of the house felt like it was slipping away from her. Kira tried again, speaking gently to Jolene one evening when the kids were finally quiet. "I can't live like this. I need some space. This isn't working." Jolene gave her a cold stare and answered, "If you married my son, then you married into this family. This is what family looks like." Kira felt her stomach twist. To Jolene, family meant control, not support. Later that night, when she lay in bed beside Miles, she whispered, Please, I need you to understand. I feel like a guest in my own home. He pulled the blanket over himself and said, You're making problems where there aren't any. Just get used to it. His tone was flat, almost careless, and it left Kira staring into the darkness, feeling smaller than ever. It was clear that Miles wasn't going to protect her from his mother's overreach. He didn't even see a problem. Kira realized then that she was alone in this fight. The house she had dreamed of had turned into a place where her voice didn't matter. That truth pressed down on her more heavily than the noise of the kids or the endless chores. It was the beginning of her understanding that the real issue wasn't Jolene's intrusion. It was Miles choosing his mother over her every single time. It started to feel like my house wasn't mine anymore. Jolene walked around moving furniture like she owned the place. One day I came into the living room and saw my wedding picture taken down, replaced with a photo of her and the kids. I just stood there staring, my chest tightening as if I'd been pushed out of my own life. The kitchen wasn't safe either. Whenever I cooked, Jolene hovered over me, shaking her head or making little jabs. No wonder Miles is so thin, she said once, pulling the pan off the stove as if I didn't know how to feed my own husband. I swallowed my anger because I didn't want to explode in front of her, but it burned inside me. It went further than that. One afternoon, I came home from errands and found strangers in my backyard. Neighbors I had never spoken to were lounging around, kids were running through my house, and food was laid out on my counter. Jolene greeted me like nothing was wrong. You should thank me, she said with a grin. I'm bringing life into this house. My throat went dry. These were people I didn't even know, and they were inside my space as if I didn't exist. That night, I broke. I sat on the bathroom floor, my knees pulled up, tears I couldn't hold back spilling down my face. When Miles walked in, I told him everything. I told him how I felt invisible, how I couldn't keep living like this, how much I needed him to stand with me. He didn't even hesitate before shutting me down. They're staying as long as they need, he said coldly. Stop making everything about you. Those words felt like a knife. It wasn't just Jolene who dismissed me. It was my own husband. In that moment, I realized I didn't have anyone on my side. The man I trusted most had already chosen his mother over me, and he wasn't going to change. Something shifted in me after that. I stopped begging for help. Instead, I picked up a notebook and started writing everything down. I logged each insult, every time furniture was moved, each guest Jolene brought into my home without asking. I even wrote down the exact words Miles said to me, word for word, so I wouldn't forget how easily he brushed me aside. I kept the notebook hidden, and every page gave me a small sense of control back. It wasn't about venting, it was preparation. They thought I was weak, that I would just keep putting up with it. But I knew better. I stayed quiet on the outside, pretending to go along with whatever Jolene wanted. But inside I was building strength. I stopped seeing Miles as my partner. To me, he became part of the problem, someone who betrayed me by standing with her instead of me. I felt broken, but also determined. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, they would one day see just how wrong they were. One afternoon, I went to grab some papers from the study and noticed an envelope with Jolene's name on it sticking out of her bag. Curiosity got the better of me, and when I opened it, my hands shook. It was a rental agreement. Jolene's house wasn't sold or abandoned like she had told us. It was rented out to another family. She wasn't homeless, she wasn't desperate. She had income coming in while using my home as her free lodging. I sat at the desk staring at the paper, my mind racing. Every sleepless night, every mess, every time she told me I was overreacting, it all came back to this. She had lied to me from the very beginning. The image of her playing the victim, saying she had nowhere to go, suddenly looked like a performance. When I confronted Miles with what I found, I expected at least some shock or anger. Instead, he barely flinched. He leaned against the counter and said, "It's just temporary. Mom needs the money right now. Don't make a big deal out of it." His calmness stunned me. He knew. All this time, he knew she had her own place and let me believe otherwise. I stared at him, waiting for an apology, some kind of understanding, but it never came. He defended her without hesitation, as if my feelings meant nothing. "You're taking this too personally," he added, and walked away like the conversation was over. In that moment, something inside me cracked. It wasn't just about Jolene anymore. It was about Miles choosing her comfort over my peace, again and again. I didn't yell. I didn't cry in front of him. I went upstairs, closed the door, and let the truth sink in. I had begged for respect, asked for boundaries, but neither of them cared. They had used me and my home, and the man I married had allowed it to happen. That realization was heavier than anything Jolene had done. For the first time, I stopped asking myself what I could do to make things better. I stopped thinking if I explained myself differently, maybe they would listen. No explanation was ever going to matter. Jolene didn't respect me, and Miles didn't protect me. Together, they had turned my dream home into a place where I felt like an outsider. I sat with my notebook open, staring at the pages filled with everything I had recorded, and I knew it wasn't just notes anymore, it was evidence. I had proof of every choice, every betrayal, every moment they pushed me aside. My silence had a purpose, and I realized I didn't have to convince anyone of how bad it was. That night, lying in bed with Miles beside me, I felt a calmness I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't going to beg him to understand me anymore. I wasn't going to argue with Jolene about respect. I decided I was done being ignored. They thought I was powerless, but they had no idea what I was preparing. This time, I wasn't going to cry or plead. I was going to act. I stopped wasting energy arguing with either of them. Nothing I said would change how they treated me, so I chose a different path. I made my voice calm when I spoke, and I even forced smiles when Jolene strutted around like she was queen of the house. On the outside, I looked cooperative. Inside, I was working on something entirely different. The first step was finding out where I stood legally. One morning, while Jolene was out shopping with the kids and Miles was at work, I called a lawyer. I explained the situation and asked about ownership of the house. After going through the records, he told me the deed was under my name only. The mortgage too. The house was bought with the inheritance I had put down, and Miles had contributed nothing. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, letting that sink in. Everything was mine, and they had been treating me like I had no say. That discovery gave me strength I didn't know I had. The lawyer advised me to keep a record of what was happening, and I already had pages of notes. He explained that if I wanted to make changes, whether about who lived there or even my marriage, I had every right. His words steadied me. For the first time in months, I felt the ground under my feet again. From then on, I began to prepare quietly. I gathered important documents and stored copies in a folder at work so no one at home could find them. I checked my accounts, secured my passwords, and even arranged for a locksmith to be on call when the time came. Every step I took in silence made me feel more in control. Around Jolene, I stayed polite. I let her believe she had full control. When she rearranged my furniture, I nodded. When she complained about my meals, I smiled faintly and changed the subject. I even listened when she bragged about the money she was making renting out her own house. She had no idea that while she mocked me, I was laying the groundwork to end all of it. Miles didn't notice a thing. He thought my quietness meant I had finally accepted the situation. If anything, he seemed relieved I wasn't complaining anymore. He spent his evenings scrolling on his phone, never realizing that every second of silence was me pulling further away from him. I no longer begged him to listen, and I no longer cried when Jolene insulted me. I had stopped looking for comfort from people who had no intention of giving it. Instead, I focused on the plan that would set me free. At night, I lay awake not with dread but with determination. I replayed the lawyer's words, reminding myself of the power I had. This house was mine. My life was mine. And though I hadn't said a word about it yet, soon Jolene and Miles would realize I wasn't their victim. I was preparing for the day when I would finally take everything back. The night it happened, I was in the kitchen cleaning up when I heard loud banging from the garage. At first, I thought it was just the kids playing around, but the noise grew sharper, metal clanking, drawers slamming. I rushed out and froze. My father's old toolbox was tipped over, tools scattered across the floor, some bent, others broken. These weren't just tools to me. They were the last pieces of him I had, things he had used with his own hands. Seeing them tossed around like worthless junk made my chest ache. I bent down, trying to pick everything up quickly, my hands shaking. A hammer with his initials carved into the handle was snapped in half. My throat closed, and I felt tears building, but I swallowed them down. I asked who had done it, and one of the kids shrugged, saying they were just playing. Jolene walked in right after, took one look, and waved it off. "Kids are kids," she said with no trace of guilt. "Stop whining, they didn't mean anything by it." Her words hit me harder than the mess itself. She wasn't sorry, not even a little. She couldn't understand that those tools were priceless to me. My voice cracked when I told her they belonged to my late father, but she only rolled her eyes like I was making a scene over nothing. I turned to Miles, expecting him to back me up at least this once. I waited for him to speak, to show me that he understood what those things meant. Instead, he shook his head and muttered, "It's just stuff, Kira. Don't overreact." Hearing that from him broke something in me. He knew how much my dad meant to me, how rare those tools were. And still, he dismissed it like it was nothing. I realized in that moment that I couldn't expect him to protect me. Not now, not ever. He had already chosen whose side he was on, and it wasn't mine. I stood in the garage surrounded by broken pieces of my father's things, and for the first time, I felt no urge to argue. My tears dried before they even fell. The silence inside me was stronger than the noise around me. I didn't raise my voice or plead for understanding. I just looked at both of them and knew I was done. From that point on, something hardened in me. I no longer felt guilty for planning my way out. I no longer doubted whether I was doing the right thing. If Miles and Jolene could treat my memories like garbage, then they had no respect for me at all. I gathered the damaged tools back into the box and carried it upstairs like I was holding the last part of my father close to me. That night, lying awake, I made a silent promise. This was the last straw. I wasn't going to let them take anything else from me. Not my home, not my peace, and definitely not my dignity. I woke up the next morning with a decision burning inside me. I wasn't afraid anymore, and I wasn't holding back either. When Jolene sat in the living room surrounded by the kids and Miles scrolled through his phone, I stood in front of them with a steady voice. I told them plainly, "You have 48 hours to leave this house." For a moment there was silence, and then Jolene burst out laughing. She looked at Miles as if I had cracked a joke. "She thinks she's in charge," she said, smirking. Miles joined in, shaking his head. "Kira, stop embarrassing yourself. You can't throw your own family out." Their reaction didn't shake me. If anything, it made me stronger. They didn't know what I had been preparing all along. I had already spoken with my lawyer, and I had every paper I needed tucked neatly into a folder. The house deed with only my name on it, the mortgage agreement, everything that proved this home was mine alone. While they mocked me, I thought about the folder waiting on the table and the copies kept safe at the lawyer's office. I also had movers lined up. I had scheduled them quietly, and they were ready to come as soon as I gave the call. Locks had been arranged to be changed the moment the house was empty. I had left nothing to chance. For weeks I had lived like a shadow in my own home, but all that time I had been building toward this moment. Jolene's smirk faded a little when I placed the official notice on the coffee table in front of her. She glanced at the papers, then back at me, confused. "What is this supposed to be?" she asked. I looked her straight in the eye and told her it was a legal order. They weren't guests here anymore, they were squatters, and I was done allowing it. Miles snatched the papers, flipping through them with disbelief. His face turned red as he realized what he was holding. "You can't be serious," he said, his voice rising. "This is our home too." I cut him off before he could twist the truth again. "No, it's not. You never contributed a cent to this place. It's mine, and you both knew it. You used me, and I let it go too far. Not anymore." The kids sat quietly for once, sensing the tension. Jolene tried to bluster, saying, "You wouldn't dare put your own husband on the street." I stood taller, keeping my voice calm. "Watch me. You have 2 days. After that, I will have people here to remove your things, and the locks will be changed." They expected me to cave like I always had, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't begging for respect anymore. I had taken it back with proof, with action, with a plan they never saw coming. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. They could laugh, they could shout, but they couldn't stop what was already in motion. The moment I laid the papers on the table, Miles lost his calm. His voice shot up, echoing through the room. "You can't throw me out, Kira. I'm your husband." He looked at me as if that title alone was enough to erase everything he had done. But it wasn't. I didn't raise my voice to meet his. Instead, I spoke clearly so every word would sink in. "You stood by while your mother used me. You knew she rented her house and still let her move in here. You let her fill my life with chaos while you called me dramatic. You've lied and excused her behavior at every step. This isn't partnership. This isn't marriage. You gave me no choice." He shook his head, his hands gripping the back of a chair as though it would steady him. "You're overreacting," he said again, the same line he had used for months. But the papers in his hands told the truth he couldn't spin. They showed the mortgage and deed under my name alone. There was no version of this story where he had any claim. Jolene couldn't keep quiet. She jumped up, her face twisted with anger. "You're destroying this family, Kira. You're tearing everything apart just to make a point. You're selfish." Her words were sharp, meant to guilt me, but they bounced off. I met her glare without flinching. "I didn't destroy anything," I said, my voice colder than I expected it could be. "You did that the moment you walked in here and treated me like free labor. You did that when you let your grandchildren wreck this house and laughed about it. And Miles did it every single time he chose you over me. Don't blame me for the mess you created." Miles tried again, his tone turning desperate. "We can fix this, Kira. Just put the papers away. Don't do this." But there was no fixing what had been broken. Trust doesn't return after betrayal this deep. His pleading wasn't about love. It was about losing the comfort he had taken for granted. I pointed at the notice lying on the table. "This isn't a threat. This is final. You have no rights here. This house was built with my inheritance, and you never contributed a thing. You both knew that, yet you treated me like I was the outsider." My voice stayed steady, even as my heart pounded. Jolene slammed her fist against the table, her voice rising above everyone else. "You'll regret this, Kira. Families stick together no matter what." I turned to her one last time and said, "Families protect each other. Families show respect. You don't get to call it family when all you've done is take." The silence that followed was heavy, and for the first time, neither of them had anything left to say. In that moment, I saw them both clearly, not as people I owed loyalty to, but as people who had betrayed me without shame. And I knew there was no turning back. The day came when Jolene had no choice but to pack her things. Movers carried out the bags she had scattered all over my home, and her grandkids followed behind, confused and restless. She muttered under her breath the whole time, throwing me glares as if I were the villain in her story. I didn't respond. I just stood by the doorway, watching years of manipulation walk out of my house. Miles wasn't prepared for me to actually go through with it. When the movers left and the house was quiet, he turned to me, his voice trembling. "Kira, don't do this. I can't leave. This is our home. We can fix it." His tone was filled with panic, as if suddenly realizing that his place in my life wasn't guaranteed. I looked at him and felt nothing but the weight of all the choices he had made. "You already decided, Miles," I said. "Every time you stood with your mother instead of me, you made your choice. Every time you told me I was overreacting, you made your choice. Don't stand here now and act like this is on me." He tried to grab my hand, desperate. "You're my wife. We can start over." His words sounded empty, rehearsed, like something he thought might buy him time. But trust isn't something you can bargain for once it's shattered. I stepped back and kept my voice calm. "You didn't stand up for me when it mattered. You let your mother turn this house into a nightmare. You let her take over our lives while you watched. I begged you, Miles. I asked for your support, and you gave me silence." His face fell when he saw the divorce papers already waiting on the table. You already talked to a lawyer?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I've been ready for this. I have everything in place. You won't be able to twist this or stall it. It's over." The fight drained out of him then. He slumped into a chair, staring at the floor, mumbling about how he never thought I'd actually go through with it. I didn't sit with him, didn't comfort him. That part of me was gone. After he left the house, I blocked his number and his mother's. No late-night apologies, no sudden changes of heart, no chance for them to crawl back into my life. The locks were already changed, and this time, they would stay that way. When the silence finally settled around me, it wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. The air felt cleaner, the rooms brighter. For the first time in months, my home actually felt like mine again. I wasn't sharing it with people who drained me or treated me like I was less. I knew the road ahead would be hard. Divorce wasn't something I ever pictured for myself. But compared to the life I had just walked away from, it felt like freedom. And freedom was worth every step. I sat in my living room, and for the first time in a long while, there was stillness. No doors slamming, no voices competing for space, no clutter scattered across the floor. Just silence, calm and steady. The house felt different now, lighter, safer, as though it had been holding its breath and finally let go. I didn't feel joy. There wasn't some sudden rush of victory. What I felt was softer, something that reached deeper than happiness. It was relief. My chest wasn't tight anymore. My thoughts weren't circling around someone else's demands. I could breathe without fear of what the next moment might bring. The hurt was still there, of course. Memories of being dismissed, of feeling invisible in my own home, weren't easy to erase. I had given my heart to a marriage that left me standing alone, and that truth weighed heavily. Yet in that same space where pain sat, strength began to rise. I had taken back what was mine, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I realized I didn't need closure from Miles or Jolene. They had shown me who they were. Waiting for apologies or explanations would only keep me tied to them. Instead, I chose acceptance, accepting that betrayal happened, that love wasn't enough to keep respect alive, and that I had walked away before losing myself completely. The walls around me no longer felt like a cage. They were mine again, filled with the promise of new memories I would create on my own terms. My father's tools, the ones that survived, were carefully placed back in the garage, reminding me of where I came from and what I was capable of carrying forward. There was sadness, yes, but it didn't overwhelm me. It balanced with a sense of freedom I hadn't known I was missing. The quiet became comforting, not lonely. For the first time in months, I felt safe in my own skin. I didn't know what the future would look like, and maybe I didn't need to yet. All I knew was that I had chosen myself, and that decision was enough to guide me forward. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't joy. But it was peace, and peace was powerful.